In the late 1970s and early 80s, Southern California's wide roads were shadowed by dark threat. The roads on which young people and children traveled had turned into death traps. The person who set this unsuccessful trap was William Bonin. His other name is Freeway Killer. His story is not just the life story of a serial killer, but also a journey into the darkest depths of human nature. Today I will take you through the unimaginable crimes of William Bonin. Are you ready? William George Bonin was born on January 8, 1947 in Connecticut. At first glance he looked like an ordinary child, but Bonin's life was far from ordinary. His father was violent and an alcoholic. There were constant fights, shouting, and physical violence at home. Her mother was cold and indifferent towards her children and often left them alone. Bonin was sent to live with his grandmother when he was only 6 years old. However, this period did not provide salvation for him. His grandmother was very disciplined and often punished Bonin. Bonin, who grew up in loneliness, fear, and abuse throughout his childhood, carried the traces of these traumas throughout his life. In his younger years, Bonin began to behave differently from the children around him. He was noted for behaviors such as lying, petty theft, and bullying. But the most disturbing aspect was his sadistic tendencies towards other children. Bonin became increasingly dangerous during his teenage years. During his high school years, he was known for bullying his friends. These bullying included physical violence, but the scariest part was that he took pleasure in the pain of others. In 1968, Bonin committed his first serious crime. He was only 21 years old, and he kidnapped and sexually assaulted a child. Thanks to the child's statements to the police, he was caught and sent to prison. However, this process, far from stopping Bonin, made him even more dangerous. During his years in prison, he was frequently abused by other inmates. These events further fueled his violent urge. After being released from prison, Bonin completely lost himself. In 1979, he committed his first murder. 13-year-old Thomas Lundgren was Bonin's first victim. Bonin tricked Thomas into his truck, tied him up, and tortured him for hours. Thomas' body was later found brutally dismembered on the side of a highway. Bonin's method of murder was always the same. He would hunt down young men on highways, pick them up in his pickup truck, and then brutally murder his victims. With each murder, he became bolder and more brutal. The most terrifying aspect of Bonin was the detailed planning he used to torture his victims. He was taking great pleasure in tying them up and torturing them for hours. For him, killing was more of a ceremony than an act. The methods Bonin used in his murders were inhumane. In 1980, 16-year-old Lawrence Sharp became one of Bonin's victims. Lawrence disappeared while walking home one night after meeting with friends. Bonin took him into his truck and tied him up. Lawrence's screams of pain during the torture he inflicted on his victim fed Bonin's sadistic pleasures. Another victim was 17-year-old Sean King. Sean was tricked by Bonin while waiting at a bus stop. His body was found dismembered in a field days later. These murders created great fear among the population in Southern California. People became hesitant to travel on highways. Bonin did not commit his crimes alone. Accomplices such as Vernon Butts and James Monroe played key roles in his murders. Vernon Butts, in particular, was Bonin's most loyal assistant. Butts was with Bonin at every stage, from the kidnapping of the victims to the torture. However, these criminal partnerships were also effective in Bonin's capture. After his capture, Butts cooperated with the police and confessed to all Bonin's plans and murders. Bonin was captured by police in 1980. Police found a binding rope, bloody gloves, and personal items belonging to the victims in his pickup truck. During interrogation, he at first denied his crimes, but he was backed into a corner by the evidence. During his trial, Bonin attracted attention with his calm demeanor. While the victims' families burst into tears in the hall, he showed no remorse. William Bonin was executed in 1996. Before his execution, he did not send any messages of remorse to the families of his victims. His story remains one of the most horrific examples of the serial killer's mind in American history. William Bonin's story reflects a dark side of human nature. He left behind only pain, fear, and trauma. But the lesson of his story brings us one step closer to understanding the masks of evil.